Bodies, the government should stay the fuck away. Yeah.
What do you think about the idea that immediately upon conception, an autonomous life exists inside of the womb?
I think it's ridiculous. It's like, to me it's the same as like saying maybe my semen or a sperm or an egg is like a life. It is eventually, but not immediately.
What do you think about the Supreme Court? Like,
yeah, I think that they don't work to serve the common people. The majority of Americans are actually for women's rights over their own bodies. It's representing political interest of the rich and powerful. We need to abolish the Supreme Court and destroy them. Destroy the institution, destroy capitalism. This entire US government is built on genocide and slavery and lies. They don't care about immigrants or helping poor people or orphans, so it's just a really convenient way to look like they care about people when they don't give a fuck about other people.
thank you, bro. I appreciate it. Anything else you want to say, my guy?
Actually, I am a rapper still.
You still rap?
I still rap, yeah.
No fucking way.
Yeah. Yo, I believe that we gotta give the choice back to the women, cause you know they got a voice strapped. That's how we gotta be armed, ready to fight the government and the capitalists. We could do it in one night, make a new system that overthrows, make a revolution, let the people all know, no foes. You know I do this for my bros, we do this for everybody from coast to coast. So put your fist up, I'm one of the illest to kill it, representing all of the children unborn. I represent for them, cause women, they're the ones who decide. Yeah, peace and love to everybody, let's ride.
Damn, Maz, you still rap, my guy. I thought you retired the hip hop career.
No, I'm getting really into it.
All right.
Yeah.
You getting back into it?
Getting really into it.
Back in the day, me and Mads had a song called Crucial Polarity. I'm going to play it over this song because I believe nobody owns the rights to it. Crucial Polarity, bringing the clarity.
Solidarity.
Change coming through Seattle solidarity. My name is Mads, yeah, you probably heard of me. I wrote a song and my destiny occurred to me.
That's insane, you remember that.
I remember every one of your bars, man. So what brought you guys out here today specifically?
So we actually are invited to a church group in Kent area. We're going there to preach there tomorrow, and we wanted to come experience Seattle tonight.
But you guys are at the location of the Roe v. Wade protest right across the street. How do you guys feel about what happened?
I think it's good that they, outlawed it for sure.
We're glad for anything that would save lives.
I definitely think abortion is murder for sure.
In what way?
Well, you're ending the life of a human. Once conception takes place, the Bible teaches us that, that God says, before I knew thee, I formed thee in the womb. And at that point, life begins. Biologically, it's true that life begins there. Yeah. I think the bottom line is this, is that people are trying to find a way to get around the consequences of their actions. And if you're having sexual intercourse, you should expect to potentially have a child. I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican.
Can I ask you what you think about abortion?
I mean, there's no life. There's no life yet. There's no life. Like there's a beating little thing where it's a cell growing. It's not had a life. It doesn't have a life. It doesn't know what a life is. It has no clue what a life is. You think, oh, it moves around, or it blinks its eyes, or it sucks its thumb, something like that, right? That proves that. Okay, but are you going to give more rights to that baby? That's that fetus. You're going to give more rights to that fetus than you are to women, right? And then all the children that are born that end up in the orphanages, that end up with abusive parents, that end up on the streets, that end up all sorts of problems, dropping out of school. You're going to have like millions of these kids in the next 10 to 20 years, okay? What are they going to do about that? Nothing. Nothing. They think that that's okay. But that's not okay, right? So I don't understand why they're just being so pig-headed and stupid. I think it's an agenda. It's just a coup. It's a coup. The Supreme Court's in the middle of a coup. It shouldn't have the powers it has. You can't pass laws like that without asking the other two branches of government for, do you think this is cool? It's a balance of power that's not been used forever because it's been usurped. It's a coup. It's been going on since, well, I don't know, my boyfriend knows.
Yes.
Mind talking to you guys real quick? So how do you guys feel about the whole Roe v. Wade thing being overturned?
Good. God created all humans, and I believe we should leave it up to Him and not take any rights away of the human to live.
So what would you do if you got pregnant in an unwanted situation? Like,
Even if I would feel like this is not a good situation, I would like to make the situation as good as possible for the child.
Right.
That it can be good in the end.
so at what point after conception do you believe that a sperm cell becomes sentient?
Immediately. Right away. I believe the human is started at conception. I believe once it's conceived, the baby has started.
For sure. But I mean, just imagine like something horrible happened to you, you got pregnant, and like you knew you were pregnant as a result of a bad situation. Like, how would you feel about bringing a kid into the world knowing that you didn't want it to be there? I mean,
Well, obviously, I'm a Christian. I believe in God, and I believe that God designed it for the woman to have a baby. And in this circumstance, we're talking about a woman that wasn't ready for it or didn't want it. But I still firmly believe that we should not kill the baby.
even if it was you.
Yes, sir.
Interesting.
Crucial polarities, bringing the clarity. Change coming through Seattle solidarity. You call me mad, yeah, you probably heard of me. I wrote a song and my destiny occurred to me.
Wonder if all these Democrats see how important that Supreme Court seat was, but failed to realize
White House aides have told the committee about the president's desire to go to the Capitol.
Did the president tell you this, that he wanted to speak at the Capitol?
Correct, yes.
During the meeting in the dining room, did the idea of the president proceeding or walking to the Capitol on the 6th after his speech come up?
Walking to the Capitol? No.
Driving to the Capitol?
It came up.
Okay, how did it come up and what was discussed?
He brought it up. He said, I want to go down to the Capitol.
What about him marching to the Capitol on the 6th?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So it's kind of a general thing. I mean, to get into the specifics of it, I was aware of a desire of the president to potentially march to the or accompany the rally attendees to the Capitol.
When did you first hear about this idea of the president accompanying rally attendees to the Capitol on the 6th?
Well, this was at the 6th. This was during the after he finished his remarks.
When the president said that he would be going to the Capitol during his speech on the ellipse, the Secret Service scrambled to find a way for him to go. We know this from witnesses and the Secret Service, also from messages among staff on the President's National Security Council. The NSC staff were monitoring the situation in real time and you can see how the situation evolved in the following chat log that the committee has obtained. As you can see, NSC staff believed that Mogul, the president, was, quote, going to the Capitol, and, quote, they are finding the best route now. From these chats, we also know the staff learned of the attack on the Capitol in real time. When President Trump left the ellipse stage at 1:10, the staff knew that rioters had invaded the inaugural stage and Capitol Police were calling for all available officers to respond. When Republican leader Kevin McCarthy heard the president say he was going to the Capitol, he called you, Ms. Hutchinson. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And in this text message, you told Tony Ornato, quote, McCarthy just called me too. And do you guys think you're coming to my office? Tell us about the call that day with Leader McCarthy during the president's speech on the ellipse.
I was still in the tent behind the stage, and when you're behind the stage, you can't really hear what's going on in front of you. So when Mr. McCarthy called me with this information, I answered the call and he sounded rushed, but also frustrated and angry at me, and I was confused because I didn't know what the president had just said. He then explained, the president just said he's marching to the Capitol. You told me this whole week you aren't coming up here. Why would you lie to me? I said, I'm not lying. I wasn't lying to you, sir. We're not going to the Capitol. And he said, well, he just said it on stage, Cassidy. Figure it out. Don't come up here. I said, I'll run the traps on this and I'll shoot you a text. I can assure you we're not coming up to the Capitol. We've already made that decision. He pressed a little bit more, believing me, but I think frustrated that the president had said that. And we ended the phone conversation after that. I called Mr. Ornato to reconfirm that we weren't going to the Capitol, and which is also in our text messages. I sent Mr. McCarthy another text telling him the affirmative that we were not going up to the Capitol, and he didn't respond after that.
And we understand, Ms. Hutchinson, that the plans for the president to come up to the Capitol had included discussions at some point about what the president would do when he came up to the Capitol on January 6th. Let's look at a clip of one of your interviews discussing that issue with the committee. When you were talking about a scheduled movement, did anyone say what the president wanted to do when he got here?
No. Not that I can specifically remember. I remember hearing a few different ideas discussed between Mark and Scott Perry, Mark and Rudy Giuliani. I don't know which conversations were elevated to the president. I don't know what he personally wanted to do when he went up to the Capitol that day. I know that there were discussions about him having another speech outside of the Capitol before going in. I know that there was a conversation about him going into the House chamber at one point.
As we've all just heard, in the days leading up to January 6th, on the day of the speech, both before and during and after the rally speech, President Trump was pushing his staff to arrange for him to come up here to the Capitol during the electoral vote count.
Our witness today is Ms. Cassie Hutchinson, who served in the Trump administration in the White House Office of Legislative Affairs from 2019 to 2020, and as a special assistant to the President in the White House Chief of Staff's office from March 2020 through January 2021. I will now swear in our witness. The witness will please stand and raise her right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. Let the record reflect the witness answered in the affirmative. I now recognize myself for questions. Ms. Hutchinson, I'd like to start with a few questions about your background. These are some photographs we've obtained highlighting your career. These show you with members of Congress, including Steve Scalise, as well as the White House with leader Kevin McCarthy and Jim Jordan. Others show you with the President and members of Congress aboard Air Force One. Before you worked in the White House, you worked on Capitol Hill for Representative Steve Scalise, the Republican whip, and Senator Ted Cruz. And then in 2019, you moved to the White House and served there until the end of
Google Fi.
The debate. Now I look to Makila Peterson to continue the case for opposition.
I'm Michaela Peterson, and it's my pleasure to oppose the House's motion that we should move beyond meat. I rewrote my entire speech an hour ago and decided just to embrace my story because my life isn't actually focused on spreading a meat diet around. I have a podcast and other things to do, but I live this every day, so I'm here to talk about it. I'll start with my absolutely absurd health experience that's received widespread negative media attention on top of being fairly unpleasant to live through. The reason for that negative media attention was because my diseases were put into complete remission by an all-meat diet. No plant food. So I understand where Heather's coming from when she cut eggs and dairy, because those were so hard on me, it was unbelievable. But it wasn't the meat. A very brief background. I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis when I was 7, with symptoms starting when I was 2. I had 37 affected joints. I spent 16 years being treated with immunosuppressants I injected twice weekly, starting when I was 8, and then other medications to treat my many other diagnosed health ailments, chronic fatigue, and severe, absolutely crippling depression. I lost my hip and my ankle, that's why I wore this skirt, so you can see this, to arthritis, and had them replaced when I was 17. I tried going the medical route, and it didn't work. When I was 23, my skin had started to break down from rashes, and those stopped healing. I couldn't sleep on my shoulders, and I was so mentally unstable I couldn't have a relationship. My right wrist felt like it was going to be next for my 3rd joint replacement. Anyway, I went back to school for biomedical science, and I decided to reduce my diet dramatically just to rule it out, not because I thought it had anything to do with my health. I cut it down to meat and whole foods, and within 2 months, it eliminated nearly all of my symptoms, and I managed to get off of SSRIs and Adderall and immune suppressants. We were absolutely shocked. 2 months of that limited diet put me into remission after 20 years of an autoimmune disorder that destroyed my joints. Soon after that, I had a baby, and that plus stopping my SSRIs way too quickly brought my autoimmune symptoms back, along with SSRI withdrawal and depression. I can't begin to describe the level of terror of having diseases return and losing my mind to depression again. A year later, again out of sheer desperation, to eliminate my autoimmune symptoms and depression, I reduced my diet further, and I went down to just meat. And I knew that that wasn't bothering me based on how I could feel after I ate it. I figured you can't be allergic to meat. I thought I was only going to be on that for a month, and then I was going to be able to reintroduce foods back in and eat normally. However, that wasn't the case. It took 6 months for my autoimmune symptoms to go away, but then they did, and my depression went away, and I was in remission again. Now, since then, I've tried to reintroduce plant foods because I actually like cake and fruit and other foods, and I don't really want to be on this diet, but I can't introduce anything without having my autoimmune symptoms come back. So, one of the arguments might say, and this is what happened with the media too, is okay, maybe this girl is just this one girl, but my family is on this diet because they have autoimmune disorders. So then it was, well, maybe this family is just a strange family. But we are a strange family, okay, so that's definitely true. But I've got a Facebook group now, and this is just small to start, but I have a Facebook group now with 7,000 people who have all been brought to this diet because they've tried the medical route and they have no other options and they're miserable, and they're recovering from diseases. The ketogenic diet, which is the type of diet I'm on, minus the plant food, has been shown to treat epilepsy since the 1920s and was kind of put out of fashion by anti-epileptics, which aren't as effective but are easier to adhere to than the diet. 1 in 9 people above the age of 65 have Alzheimer's, which is now being referred to as type 3 diabetes, induced by carbs and sugar. There's an obesity epidemic in America, with 36% of Americans overweight and 32% obese. 1 in 5 people there have an autoimmune disorder like me. 1 in 6 people are on a psychiatric medication, which are almost impossible to get off of, like I was. A potential solution that should be seriously looked into is radically simplifying diet with fewer ingredients, going back to a time when we weren't all chronically ill, and that involves dramatically increasing red meat consumption and decreasing plant foods. The demonization of red meat was based off of a few hypotheses based on observational studies that have been proven to be false. Saturated fat has slowly been disappearing as the cause for heart disease in scientific literature because it's not the cause for heart disease. The studies on colorectal cancer were done on people who also ate more sugar and processed foods, McDonald's. The need for fiber is a myth when you don't consume plant. High levels of vitamins, it turns out that's only necessary because we're consuming so many carbs, we can't handle the amount of sugar in our body. As soon as you eat more meat and less processed food, that need goes away and vitamin deficiencies recover. I think what people should be focused on more than anything else is making other people healthier. Can you imagine a population where obesity, in areas of the world where women can't work or own land, they can usually own ruminant animals. That gives them and their families money, food, and a job. In places like Kenya, people's diets are mainly starches, not out of choice. And there are studies showing that adding meat into these children's meals increases their test scores by 45%. If you use meat as a first food for a baby, their head circumference is actually larger than babies fed without meat. My main concern is people eating healthily, and meat is the healthiest and most improperly villainized food out there. Ruminant meat is the only food that people can actually survive on as a single food without supplementing anything else, which is the perfect elemental diet for a sick person. I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone, and I want to reduce the suffering so badly that I'll stand here and tell you that only eating meat might put certain diseases into remission. I get where the negativity comes from. It's unbelievable. It's so unbelievable that in the first study on the carnivore diet, released by Harvard this November, that I actually read in the Oxford University Press 2 days ago, which was convenient, To common expectations, adults consuming a carnivore diet experienced few adverse effects and instead reported health benefits and high satisfaction. The generalizability of these findings and the long-term effects of this dietary pattern require further study. The surprise came because an average of 90% of people saw improvements across all diseases on the diet. 1 in 4 people over 64 have type 2 diabetes in America. All respondents with diabetes discontinued non-insulin injection agents. 84% discontinued oral medication, and 92% of participants on the carnivore diet with type 2 diabetes discontinued insulin altogether. Over 2,000 people were studied who were on the diet for over 6 months, and there was a 90% reduction in all diseases. In my opinion, this type of potential treatment for disease needs to be studied further before we move beyond meat. Thank you.
What do you want?
Want a job that I don't hate. Want to do something.
So if I kick a dog and that dog cowers and makes a whelping noise...
You know what? You got me in the corner, man. You got me in the corner.
Okay.
Good shit.
Thank you.
Yeah, nah. You got me in the corner. Good debate, dude. I fucking fell off, dude. I used to debate for high school. Fucking fell off. You got me in the corner. I just have to admit. Yeah, like at this point, I can't fucking keep grinding my gears. Good shit, guys.
Nice to meet you,
Nice to meet you too, boss.
Thank you so much. My name is Ed, and today I'm at the University of Arizona, which is in Tucson, Arizona, of course. And I have a banner that says, "Give me your best argument for not being vegan." You very kindly sat down, which I appreciate. Yeah. So let me know what your response is to the banner in question.
So this is a very fun argument that my dad has been telling me to go vegan. It's because he says, meat takes more time to digest, where it's not made for you, this and that. But at the end of the day, honestly, eating meat, barbecues, it brings me happiness, man. So, and at the end of the day, I think of it like if I'm not going out and hunting an animal, I'm going to Walmart. Now that meat's already there. It's been, it's whatever. It's a whole industry, meat industry, and I buy meat because I love meat. I love to barbecue, so it brings me happiness, and that's why I feel like as long as I am not physically, it brings me happiness, and
Well, there's two arguments there, isn't it? The first is happiness. The second is the meat's already there. Why is the meat there?
The meat's there because it has been killed before.
And why have they been killed?
Because there is a large portion of the population, I guess, that likes to eat meat, you know?
Yep. And so what happens when we buy that meat?
When I buy that meat, I am contributing to, basically, when I pay for it, that money goes to their industry and they use it however, I'm assuming to make more meat, make more profits eventually.
Absolutely. I mean, it's supply and demand, isn't it? You're familiar with supply and demand?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's all it is in action, isn't it? The animals are dead there, obviously, but when we pay for it, we're demanding for our purchase that more be supplied. Mm-hmm, yeah. So we're contributing to more animals suffering as a consequence of that. You said about happiness. Should our happiness come at the life expense of others? Exactly.
So yeah, so that's the thing, right? How do you know if the animal's happy or not? You don't know really, right? So, and because it's now, I mean, it's kind of like we can't assume that every person out here right now around us is happy, right? You would say that we all have like an equal opportunity to be happy, we should, you know, like, you know, we have the resources and this and that, but at the end of the day, every personal circumstance is different, right? Which eventually may like leads to our happiness or not. So I feel like, so the question, should our happiness come before the animal's happiness? I genuinely think, like, why not? Because like at the end of the day, you have no guarantee. You're not actively showing me that this animal is happy.
Oh no. Well, you know, I mean, they're not happy. That's the problem, isn't it?
So,
the question isn't whether or not our happiness should come before their happiness, whether or not our happiness should contribute to a system that causes them suffering and kills them. So should an animal suffer and be killed for our happiness is the question.
Okay, one more, I guess, like a counter question: would being a meat-eating person be okay if they came up with a system that's entirely sufferingless, entirely sufferless? You know, these animals, let's just assume these animals do not feel an ounce of pain. So like in that case, is being vegan okay? Being like meat-eating, is that being a meat eater okay in that case?
Well, firstly, obviously that doesn't exist, so that's not what we're supporting. But second, even if it did, no, because animals still has to be killed for the products that we consume. So even if you found a way to raise them and kill them that was devoid of suffering, you're still killing them, and as a consequence of killing them, depriving them of living in a longer, happier life. So no, that wouldn't work. But also, it's important to recognise that that's not what we're supporting. But just to ask that question again, should our happiness be viewed as more important than the suffering and life of an animal?
I don't think anybody's happiness should be, more important than the suffering and life of an animal. But at the end of the day, it's the circle of life. Sure. You feel me?
What does that mean?
So the circle of what I mean by that is in the wild. Right now, just an example. You have so there's actually this one Instagram page, the Dark Side of Nature, that I follow. These motherfuckers post the gnarliest of shit, bro. Yeah. Like there's like a zebra being eaten, like a pregnant zebra, bro, being eaten alive by lions, bro. Gnarliest of shit. Yeah. I don't have the heart to watch some of it, bro, to be honest. But at the end of the day, that's what nature really is, man.
I mean, look, nature is gnarly, yeah. It's full of horrible examples of suffering and cruelty and harm. But even though that's true, does that mean that it's okay for us to cause suffering that we don't need to cause? Like, is it just because suffering exists, should we contribute to creating more suffering?
Oh, wait, that's a great perspective. So, so in terms of like suffering, right? So in this just this case, like, should we kill more animals? I feel like that question is framed in a way where you don't want to support animal suffering. You don't want to see these cute animals being suffered. But at the end of the day, bro, lamb is just tasty as shit. Like, I love mutton. Yeah. And but I mean, like, I feel like I'm not able to, Well,
the thing is, you say that we don't want to support animal suffering, but you're paying for it. The situations we're describing only exist because people like yourself pay for it.
But now let's say like mainly the meats that are consumed in America is beef, pork, and chicken, let's say, right? Sure. Beef, pork, chicken. So beef, pork, chicken, these are three animals that, let's say we just stop consuming them. Yeah. First of all, I feel like that would have negative repercussions for the environment because these guys would just be running amok. Sure. But I feel like at the end of the day, should we create more suffering for these animals? Like, no, that's wrong, right? That's wrong. But at the end of the day, being a vegan, trees, that's like, that's a life.
It's a life, yeah.
That's a life.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, just because it may or may not feel pain or whatever, you're still taking a life. Sure. Now the question now remains, like, at the end of the day, if a life is being taken, now all the question that remains is the part of suffering, right? Like, is that animal suffering when I kill it or not?
Well, that's not the only thing. Obviously, cells in our body are alive, but the act of taking an antibiotic to kill bad bacteria in our body is obviously very different to the act of killing an animal. And it's the same with plants. You know, plants are alive, but they're not sentient. At least not in the way that we perceive them to be. Closely aligned with the animals who we do consume. So whilst we are taking life, we're still taking life that has the capacity to suffer less, and also the experience of life they have is very different. So whilst we could go up to a cow and shoot them in the head and they wouldn't suffer, that cow is still having a subjective experience of life that we're depriving them of. You know, let's say a dog who walks past, it wouldn't be moral to kill a dog even if we do so in a way that doesn't cause them suffering. It's still immoral to kill when we don't need to, obviously. So it's about choosing things that reduce harm, reduce suffering, and choosing to take life that experiences life in a diminished capacity compared to other life that we currently choose to take. And then to kind of go back to a couple of things that you had said kind of just before that. Now, the thing to remember, or to consider at least, is that the only reason we have all these animals is because we breed them into existence. So the logic that we're using right now, or that you've applied, is that we need to keep killing these animals, because if we stop killing these animals, we'll have to kill these animals. But the alternative is to simply stop breeding them into existence. And so the more that we breed into existence, the bigger the problem is. But if we stop breeding them into existence, this issue of overpopulation won't happen, because we simply won't bring these animals into existence in the first place.
I see. So one thing I kind of like caught on was, because you said that we're depriving. If I go up to a cow, shoot in the head, zero suffering, but I'm still depriving it of the life it could, potentially still experience. But then how is that kind of different from doing that to a plant? Now I'm taking its, or like any vegan organ is like, not vegan organ, that's kind of a weird term, but you know what I mean? That's not meat. So like, you are depriving it. I mean, we still know it has cells, it has cells in this body, keeping it alive. It's taking in oxygen, giving out carbon dioxide, making food. It's got the whole 9 yards happening. So am I not depriving that of a life as well? I mean, see, all I'm saying is at the end of the day, we have to kill to eat.
Yes.
We're killing either plants, or we're killing either animals, right? So I feel like as long as it's not causing a significant problem, like like meat eating, as long as it's not causing a significant problem. Like, there are some places who, like, these fuckers are poaching sharks and shit, who are, hey, come on, don't do that,
Sure, you gotta do that.
Yeah, come on, there's lamb, beef, beautiful fucking shit you can grill and all that, bro. Tender meat, juicy. You get really hurting someone, like actually.
But that's ironic,
but
right?
It's suffering. Yeah, it's ironic. It's suffering, but that's the thing. At the end of the day, even a vegan person's having to kill, But it's just about what you're killing.
Sure, absolutely it is. But what we're killing is very important, because plants. Okay. The first thing to consider is this: even if we think that plants and animals are morally comparable, animals consume plants, right?
Okay.
So animals, by the virtue of having to consume, eat more plants. Because think about how much a cow eats over their lifespan. So actually, by being vegan, we reduce the number of plants that are being killed as well. So even if we think that plants should be morally relevant, by being vegan, we're still contributing to less plants being killed and consumed overall, because we're eliminating the 85 billion land animals or so. So, in and of itself, you've also made an argument to be vegan, because that reduces the amount of plants being harmed.
But then why are you kind of like against the circle? Not against, but like, why are you just kind of like, why interfere with that circle of life? Because I mean, God made, apart from humans, God has a very nice system, like animals eat, like.
That nice?
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful system,
If I was
what would you take out of the system, I guess?
Unnecessary suffering and harm. If I was a god and I could have created the world in any way that I saw fit, I'd have created the world where suffering and harm need not exist.
How do you know love without suffering? If there is no definition of pain, if there is no definition of suffering, if there's no definition of bad, there's no definition of good. You have to have the other side of the coin.
No, I mean, I disagree, but obviously we're talking, we're going off on a tangent.
Huh?
But the circle of life you're describing, the circle of life purely means this. Everyone who's born is going to die. That's all it means. But it doesn't mean that we have the right to take life prematurely. You're going to die one day, Yeah. That's the fact of life. Someone's not justified to come up and kill you just because that's true. And so obviously everyone's going to die, but that doesn't mean that we have the right just to take life arbitrarily and unnecessarily. If we cannot take life, even though that life will one day die, it's still not right for us to take life when we don't need to.
But I'm just kind of like failing to see the double standard between plants and animals now.
Okay, so let's say you have two choices. One is to cut the throat of a pig, and one is to cut the stalk of a broccoli.
Okay.
Is there a moral difference between those two things?
I am killing a living thing.
So is there a moral difference between those two things? No. So what about killing a human and cutting the stalk of a broccoli?
Now that's two very different things.
Why?
Now the reason is because I will not devour the human after that. That means I am killing simply for the act of killing, which is very wrong. That means I'm a murderer at that point. Here I am killing to consume its to cook, to provide, nutrition to other people who will eat with me.
But you could cannibalize.
I'm not a cannibal.
You could be. And if you were, would that make it okay?
So now it's going into ifs and buts. Cannibalism is illegal, so I think we should just entirely take that topic off the table.
Does legality equal morality?
I feel like we live in a world where we have to mold our morality according to legality.
But does legality equal morality? Is something moral because it's legal or immoral because it's illegal?
I feel your morals are the way you define it, right?
Okay, but what do you think about the question I'm asking?
So kill the stalk of killing someone, and then a stalk of a broccoli. But that's what I'm saying. There's two very different incentives to do so.
But if you were to cannibalize, the incentive would be the same.
Let's say the incentive is the same. I'm a cannibal and I'm killing it.
So is it now moral to kill a human because we're going to eat them?
So now this is considering a world where everybody around me is also cannibals.
Not necessarily. It's just applying the logic you've used.
Now that's the different thing. Now I'm an outcast because not everybody around me is a cannibal.
But that doesn't mean that it's moral or immoral. You can be an outcast doing a moral thing.
It's not a question about. I don't feel like it's a question about. Interesting. So now, this is two very different scenarios, though. It's like you got a meat-eating guy versus broccoli, and a whole human versus broccoli, but. In the human versus broccoli case, I'm kind of like an outcast, We're not living in a world of cannibals. Sure. And so...
But you could.
For me, no. Let's say, like I said, morality is defined by a person. So I would say that for me, morally killing, even if I'm a cannibal, let's say I'm a cannibal, right? Okay. And then killing a person, a sentient human being who can vocally express, vocally in my language, not through actions or sounds and shit, can straight up tell me that I don't want you to kill me. Sure. I want to live another day. Yeah. You're taking that man's, will to live away. Now the cow thing, if we go backtrack.
Well, what if they don't speak English though? What if they speak Chinese and you don't understand it? It's just sounds and language. It's just sounds and noises again.
Oh, very interesting, huh? I mean, so I would say, I'd get a translator, but let's just say they can't talk or nothing. I get where you're coming from. I don't know, dude. That's a very interesting perspective, but that's the thing. I just feel like we're comparing apples and oranges, you know?
Not really, because the logic you use is that killing a pig and cutting a piece of a broccoli stalk is morally the same because it's about nutrition. And so you're saying, well, it's the same to kill a pig as it is to cut the broccoli because you're going to eat them. But then if I kill a human to consume them, it should, that's all right, don't worry. Then morally, it must be the same and comparable because it's taking life, but it's okay because I'm taking life to consume nutrients.
That means we're also drawing a parallel between like beef, lamb and stuff, and a human.
Sure, but you're the one who's drawing those comparisons by saying that it's morally justified to kill anyone if they're alive simply because you can get nutrients from doing so as a consequence of killing them.
I said we should an animal. Yeah. If I kill an animal.
Humans are animals?
Humans are animals, but there's a reason we've come to call ourselves humans now. When we say animals, we don't when we say animals to eat, we don't consider humans. It's understood humans are not
But
in
why?
that.
Why?
It's because you realize you have to take someone's life,
Yep.
like unwillingly. Like
Yeah.
animals cannot convey that.
They can.
Like,
They can make noises. They can fight to try and survive.
how do you know that's just vocal?
So if I kick a dog and that dog cowers and makes a whelping
You
noise,
know what? You got me in the corner, man. You got me in the corner.
Okay.
Good shit.
Thank you.
Yeah, nah. You got me in the corner.
I
Good
appreciate
debate, dude. I fucking fell off, dude. I used to debate for high school. Fucking fell off. You got me in the corner.
Thank
I
you.
just have to admit,
I
yeah. Like
appreciate
at this
that.
point, I can't fucking keep grinding my gears. Good shit, guys. He got me.
I appreciate
But
that.
I love meat. I
Okay.
love lamb. I love to barbecue. I'm like the type of guy. Today's a Saturday. No, today's a Friday,
Friday,
right?
yeah.
Saturday tomorrow. I'm gonna go up to the pool.
Yeah.
Get a couple, 6-pack Coronas,
Sounds nice.
a nice lamb, and we're gonna be fucking grilling that shit. But
is that a moral thing to do?
by tomorrow, 6 beers down, morality's gonna be out the window for me. No, I don't know, man.
It won't be out the window because
No, I'm
you
playing.
wouldn't rape someone, would you?
Oh,
No. So morality's
But,
not out the window then.
For me, me personally, killing an animal and eating it, I feel it does not go. It's not immoral.
But then morally justify it.
Morally justified, I personally, while I contribute by paying to the killing of the animal, as long as I don't have to kill an animal with my own hands, I'm chill.
But why are they being killed?
Because I want to eat it. And
So they're being killed for you.
Yeah, I guess you
So
can
you
say.
are paying for it.
Yep.
Yeah. So are you culpable?
Grammarly makes communication at work one click simpler. Whether you're looking for a new job or you love the one you have, Grammarly can help you communicate with confidence. Concise writing means fewer miscommunications. Grammarly can help streamline your message so it reads loud and clear.
What's up, what's up, what's up?
We can
What's
even
up,
check the
guys?
tone of your emails
What's
to
going
help you
on,
build
man?
relationships at that
How
new
you
dream
doing?
job. Congrats! Grammarly, better writing made one click simpler.
How are you doing, Josh? What you got going on today, bro? My fault I didn't see your...
When was the last time you did a proper cleanse of your intestines? Maybe you do them often, maybe you've never done one. But when most...
I guess you could say...
What's up, Josh? How's your day going, bro? I'm sorry I didn't see your message earlier.
For their murder, yeah.
So then how do you
100%
morally
I am.
justify it?
Well, I guess maybe I don't. I just like to eat meat then. Maybe it's not morally justified.
Maybe not. So if someone enjoys something, that makes it okay?
If someone, ooh, so now we're getting into dangerous territory, dog. Because if, there can be people who can enjoy a shit ton of weird stuff.
Exactly.
But then is it okay?
Yes. Is it?
Ooh. See, that's depends on the nature of the crime, man. I mean, dude, I've been watching a lot of documentaries and these days on Netflix, and bro, people are weird. They like weird shit.
Yeah.
Some people
like
just
killing animals unnecessarily.
Oh, hey, I see what you did there. But shit, I mean, yeah, I guess might not be the best, but animals are tasty, man.
Sure.
I'm sorry. They're
Right,
just.
but some people think humans are tasty. So there we go again, right? Cannibalism.
That's.
And so what,
Damn.
but
You know what? I would genuinely love to have this debate. Can I do a little more research and shit? Because I just saw that I came out to get some bananas and shit.
At least it was bananas. So.
Yeah, banana. I got some eggs too. So.
Ah, well, that's a shame.
Yeah, dude, I would honestly I'm stumped right now. I where you're coming from, you got the upper hand. I'm stumped right now. Don't got nothing to say.
Yeah.
So, shit. I mean, yeah, that's where I am right now. So.
Sure. Okay, well, what I'd love to do is give you some resources so you can look into it in your own time as
Yes,
well.
sir.
But I think the important thing to recognize is just because you enjoy something doesn't mean it's okay, right?
Maybe, you know what? Yeah, that's true. Maybe, what if you're a bully and shit? You like to bully people, that's not okay.
It's not okay, is it? But
And-
they could say, well, hey, what a circle of life. Nature is cruel. Other animals do bullying things to other animals, and I like it.
Shit, yeah, that's a perspective of thinking about if you enjoy something, is it okay?
Yeah.
That gives me something to go home and think about. I appreciate that.
And you could see someone punching someone and go, hey man, don't punch that person. They go,
I enjoy
you're stood
that.
on grass right now, and grass is alive too. So there you go. The logic that we use doesn't always make sense, right?
Yeah, it gets nasty. Good stuff. That was an interesting talk, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I would love to write down some resources. Have you got notes or something on your phone?
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, dog. I appreciate it.
So nice to meet you.
Yeah, and you too, likewise. And it was gave me something to think about when
I'm
I
glad.
go home. And
I'm glad to hear that.
Dude, that's what life is all about.
Absolutely.
Taking a new perspective.
Absolutely.
You know?
It is.
Learning every day, because you gotta be 1% better every day.
Absolutely right.
You gotta be the different person that went to bed.
Absolutely
But
right.
Good talk,
So
guys.
nice to
Thank
meet
so
you.
much. Yeah.
Have a great life, my friend.
Hey, you too, bud.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Why choose proven quality sleep from Sleep Number? Because every 5K, easy bucket, and all-day dance party starts the night before on the Sleep Number 360 smart bed. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. Visit sleepnumber.com to learn more.
Our gratitude.
What's up? What's up? What's up? What's going on?
I found some.
Inflammation, low-grade inflammation, is the underlying factor in over 90%.
I now ask Manuel Faber to conclude the whole debate.
Mr. President, thank you very much for the privilege and listening to this debate, real pleasure, of speaking tonight, especially on the eve of an Oxford Union election. And thank you all for being here. We've just heard passionate, scientific, personal stories and facts. I would like to base my argument on 3 different arguments tonight, based on what we have heard tonight. My first is ethics. We've heard a lot about morals and ethics, so I would like to take you on an ethical journey of why you would want to vote with the opposition tonight. My second is scale. We've heard a lot about factory farming, but we've also heard about regenerative agriculture, or will hear a bit about that. And thirdly, culture. And I was very, very pleased that the proposition brought up several points that will be really, really interesting, in my eyes, to dissect. First, ethics. It's brilliant to see the proposition take such a moral high ground in this debate tonight. I would say, contrary to Carol's white supremacy of eating meat argument, that I would argue that veganism can be considered an ideology as well, a Western liberal agenda that feels on a moral high ground. So, the Western liberal agenda. Should we really question the ethics of driving up demand for crops that require high inputs of fertilizer, fungicides, pesticides, herbicides, and so on and so forth, as well as we've also heard earlier, the killing of smaller animals and the destroying of habitats for them? So, thank you. Really, it's detrimental for the environment either way. Whether or not that is exceeded by that of the meat industry, if you only produce crops and cereals, that's unlikely, I would assume. So, thinking about this, especially on Thanksgiving, which is today, it is rather striking that meat eaters are being shamed for eating meat in the 21st century. That really is about removing shame. It's fine if you live your life today. It's fine who you marry today, fortunately. So why wouldn't it fine for us to eat meat? Why are we inventing a new type of shame, if you will, instead of accepting each other for who we are? Doesn't it feel like an agenda to you, especially on Thanksgiving Day? I don't know how many of you had to miss Thanksgiving invites tonight. I have one at my house that I can't attend because I'm passionately defending, at least sometimes, consuming meat. And that goes to my point of Heather earlier saying she's evangelical about being vegan, which your passion really showed. And I thought that was brilliant. And it did remind me of a popular joke, and I hope no one takes offense to that. But how can you tell if someone is vegan? Well, don't worry, they will tell you. I did find it rather striking, however, that there was a comparison made between dairy and opium addiction, and later Carol equating meat eating to being an anti-abortionist. I find that rather crass, and I'm not sure I agree. In fact, I disagree. And this is in no way trying to discredit any of both of your incredible contributions to nutrition and discourse, societal discourse. But, ladies and gentlemen, do not let the proposition tonight convince you that you are a bad person because you want to enjoy a turkey tonight or eat a steak over the weekend. Meat isn't inherently bad at all, and it shouldn't be villainized, as Michaela said earlier. I believe it's quite useful to deconstruct meat into the two understandings of it links to this idea of scale that I will go into. Yes, some forms of its production in the contemporary landscape are unsustainable. factory farming, but the consumption and the potential place of meat isn't intrinsically wrong or damaging. The proposition side may have you believe that, and it again misunderstands, that meat is a capitalist identity or part of a capitalist identity. And to that, really all of the identities, it makes it implicit, which is quite unfair. So my second point was about scale and reframing the debate away from being polarizing and polemical, which I apparently did not really succeed in. It's really a matter of scale and balancing the ecological equation, which does not necessitate the abolition of animals' food sources. This is a scientific study doing a biophysical simulation model to calculate human carrying capacity under 10 different diet scenarios. Peterson et al. In 2016 saw that the carrying capacity was generally higher for scenarios with less meat. However, the carrying capacity of the vegan diet was lower than the two omnivore diet scenarios. So that is a point of it being in relation to scale. Factory farming, which we've all agreed tonight, is not the way forward, but abolishing meat altogether is not either. And my third point on culture, and thank you for bringing that up, when I heard the earlier point on pasture that Peter brought up, I was immediately reminded of my upbringing and of Psalm 23, where we are asked to be led to green pasture, which I thought felt a great segue to the cultural argument I would like to make. And interestingly, Heather brought up the Inuit, who she is or was helping in creating alternative food sources. It's important to understand that while veganism may serve as a seminal form of identity formation, it fails to apply that same metric to the consumption of animal products, which are in a cultural sense. So food can serve as an important vehicle in the production of meaning and identity for a culture on the vegan side, but also on the side of consuming meat. One way, for example, the Inuit generate meaning is by situating themselves, their actions, and the objects they use and consume within a spectrum of dichotomies distinguishing the world of Inuit from the world of, and I'm going to mispronounce this, so apologies, Kwalunat, which refers to the white people or the people of Euro-Canadian descent. So the way in which Inuit describe a particular way of eating as being typically Inuit, or a certain food as typically white people food, reveals how Inuit objectify, institutionalize, and even reify a world of objects and practices that in their case includes the consumption of meat. I also support, and I'm sorry that didn't come through as clearly, Indigenous Peoples Day, but I also support not denying people to eat what they want. So in a way, the earlier argument made by Carol did sound to me as well as a somewhat pseudo-colonial form of oppression to suppress cultural tradition and rituals, such as the ones just described in the case of the Inuit that Heather also mentioned earlier. And a vote rejecting meat tonight is also a vote of cultural erasure. I know I'm keeping you from enjoying your steaks, Thanksgiving dinners, Beyond Meat burgers, whatever it is. So my three arguments, along with my fellow opposition speakers, were about ethics, that it's fine to eat meat and you're not a bad person for doing so. About scale, it is largely the problem with industrial farming And thirdly, that it's culturally insensitive to forbid people or urge people not to consume meat. So whatever you eat, and I believe you have the freedom to eat whatever you like, make sure it's all part of a balanced diet, as advised by your physicians and nutritionists, just like voting with the opposition is tonight. Thank you very much.
In this was something that happened. A modicum of pleasure from it.
Recording this. So this gentleman here I saw first, the lady there in the turtleneck. But there is so much more to discuss about whether meat belongs on our table, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have such distinguished and interesting, and I can tell you from some of the discussions I was just overhearing in the green room, they have some interesting and even counterintuitive views, which we will be hearing more about. So each speaker will speak for about 9 or 10 minutes. We'll then have a discussion, and we want to include you. I know there are a lot of people here with strong views, passionate views. In the audience, we'll bring you in to ask questions and engage with both Adrian and George. So it's my absolute delight to welcome our first speaker. Our speaker for the motion is the Sunday Times restaurant and TV critic. You'll know him as A.A. Gill. He's also worked as an artist and a chef. He says, and this is one of the less colourful quotes I've heard from him on the subject, he will eat anything that doesn't have a birth certificate. Please welcome A.A. Gill.
Good evening, I'm Adrian. We start off by separating the cunts and the loonies. How many of you already are vegan, vegetarian stuff? Hands up. We could just ask them to show us their shoes, couldn't we? And how many eat meat? What are you doing here? I mean, this always works the other way around. Whenever we do this, George goes off, held, shoulder high, and I'm kicked down the servant steps. This argument is always about vegetarians, vegans, Notting Hill nutters, who want to change the way the rest of us eat. So let me first of all lay out my stall. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit what you eat, any of you. I don't want to make you eat meat. I don't want to stop you eating meat. I don't want to improve your diet. You go and eat whatever you like. I'm an extreme libertarian. I just think that the point of life is to do as much as you can, as often as you can, as freely as you can. That being said, one of the most important things that ever happened to us as a species was that we ate meat. G.K. Chesterton said, it was a brave man who first ate an oyster. Well, he just wasn't. We all were derived from animals that had eaten oysters for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. The really brave man was the first man that ate a burnt animal. Can you imagine how terrifying that must have been? All you ever seen of fire is horrifying. And suddenly you come across this thing that stinks of death and burning. And the missus says, bet you wouldn't eat that. But he does. And it changes everything. Why does it change everything? Good. Protein. More important than protein, cooperation. Vegetable eaters do it on their own. Meat eaters do it together. Eating big bits of meat, eating big animals, means cooperation. If you cook it, you can feed old people with bad teeth and young people with no teeth. You can eat a huge amount more. The difference that makes in live births for your pregnant women, in being able to live 3 or 4 years longer and be productive, is enough to put us in this hall where they cut up the first dead body. Meat eating is what makes us cooperative. It's actually what makes dinner parties. That may not be a good thing. The other thing I wanted to say before we go on, and I'm more interested in your questions really than my going on about meat, but I did want to say, have you ever thought about how few things we actually eat? I mean, how few animals we actually eat? Very, very few. And there's a reason for that. To farm animals, you have to have the acquiescence of the animal. You can't farm animals that don't want to be farmed. It's not us making them do it. They have to see a point in being farm animals. And not many of them do. Guinea pigs. You all keep guinea pigs, don't you? Eating guinea pigs? Guinea pigs live in people's kitchens in Peru? Peru. In Peru, where they eat corn? Corn, yes. So they shuck corn goes on the floor, guinea pigs eat the corn. Every so often, someone goes down, beats a guinea pig on the head and eats the guinea pig. Now, that works for the guinea pig because they get a safe environment, they get to have babies, they get to continue to breed, they go on, and occasionally one gets beaten on the back of the head. But the important thing is that outside the kitchen, the Peruvians also keep dogs. But the dogs don't live in the kitchen, they live outside the kitchen. So the guinea pigs don't want to go outside the kitchen. So guinea pigs live in this safe environment, and it's a mutually successful relationship. They go on being a species, they go on, and they get eaten when they get fat. That works for them. The animal that most people wanted to farm more than anything else, right at the beginning of husbandry, over that great swathe in Iraq and the Middle East, the animal they were desperate to be able to farm were cheetahs. Well, you would, wouldn't you? I mean, who'd not want to have a cheetah? You could hunt with it. I mean, it's just brilliant. Desperate to farm with cheetahs. But you can't. And they tried for thousands and thousands of years. And you can do it one at a time. If you find orphaned cubs, you can train them. They will live quite happily with people. What cheetahs won't do is they won't live with each other. Animals that are farmed have to be able to live not just with us, but with each other. And they have to do something which is very specific, which is neoteny. Neoteny? This is the ability to remain forever young. It's the ability of a dog never to grow up to be a wolf. So you remain adolescent even though your body becomes fully grown. You couldn't live with a real wild sheep. They're fucking rough. You probably couldn't live with a real wild cow. Who would know? Has anyone ever seen a wild cow? No, you have. None of you have. The last one died out in the 17th century. They don't exist anymore. Cows made a deal with us. We look after them, we'd milk them, we'd farm them, and they will be one of the most successful animals in the world. They are. The wild ones, the ones who went, fuck off, I'm the Jimmy Dean of cows. died in Hungary. Appropriately. Chickens. Anyone ever seen a wild chicken?
What's that bullshit?
I mean, I don't mean just an angry chicken, I mean, like a wild chicken. Hardly, we're not entirely sure where chickens come from. Probably from Far East, bit of India, jungle fowl. So useless at being birds. Completely, they talk about drawing a short straw. What was the, can't fly, looks stupid. The one thing they had to get them through to the next generation was an ability to lay an egg a day. Very few things can do that, or would want to. But it made them very useful to us. So we said, look, fuck it. We'll get rid of the leopards and the dogs and the monkeys and the rats. We'll lock you up, keep you mostly away from the foxes. Just keep laying the eggs, one a day. And they went, really, is that it? It's chickens. Anyway, that's my bid for meat eating. I leave it now to George to tell you the really interesting stuff.
Thank you, Adrian. I told you there were some counterintuitive things that would come out. Our speaker against the motion is a regular columnist for The Guardian. Having wavered for years between eating and not eating meat, he now says he's about 97% vegan. He eats, and I'm not making this up, roadkill and the odd bit of fish or egg. Please welcome George Monbiot.
Well, Adrian and I disagree about almost everything, but I hate myself for laughing so much whenever he puts the opposing case. It is actually a pleasure to be contradicted by him, so thank you, even when I'm the butt of the joke. Anyway, I'm probably, by inclination, even more omnivorous than you are. I mean, I got lost once in West Papua, and ran out of food and ended up eating rats, snakes, stick insects, and got quite a taste for the unusual. And in this country, I've eaten grasshoppers and crickets and daddy longlegs and mayflies and caddisflies and earwigs and beetle grubs and woodlice. I don't recommend woodlice, they taste of soap. And just about every possible cut of meat and offal there could be, including every variety of roadkill except cats, dogs, and, as we established beforehand, cyclists, who get pretty sweaty under the lycra. I don't have the sort of usual profile, I suppose, of an almost vegan. When I was a young man, I worked on an intensive pig farm, and one of my jobs was after a 2-week freeze where quite a lot of the pigs died, and we weren't able to do anything about it because the whole farm was locked down with ice. I had to get rid of the pigs, the dead pigs. And by then they'd blown out like barrage balloons, and I had to burst them and then dig them out with a shovel. And after that, nothing can revolt you except parsnips, obviously, which are truly disgusting. So why this change? How come someone with such gross appetites as myself ended up as a nearly vegan? Well, it's because livestock keeping, and indeed fish catching, is just wrecking everything I love and am delighted and enchanted by in the natural world. And like all blindingly obvious things, it took me a long time to see it. It wasn't until I was living in mid-Wales that I began to realise that something was very seriously screwed up about everything I could see. Because whichever direction I walked in, there is, well, yeah, okay, it's Wales, but whichever direction I walked in, there was almost nothing there. Not just that there weren't any people, there were no trees, there were no birds, there were no flowers, there were no insects. It was just these wastelands of basically more grass and nothing else. And the reason for it was a single agent of destruction, the white plague, the woolly maggot, the invasive ruminant from Mesopotamia, the sheep. The hills had been comprehensively shagged. And not just across Wales, but across all the uplands of the UK, the places which should be our great wildlife refuges, because there's absolutely no sodding point in farming them because they're so unproductive, have been reduced to wet deserts by the sheep. They have been sheep-wrecked. And I did a calculation the other day with the help of a researcher, and we haven't quite refined it to the level at which I'd be happy with, but it's roughly this. The first bit we know for sure, that meat from sheep, in other words, lamb, mutton, and hogget in this country produces about 0.4% of our diet in terms of calories. Yet, sheep keeping occupies roughly the same area all the arable and horticultural crops that we grow in Britain. All the grains, all the potatoes, all the oil seeds, all the fruit, all the vegetables for 0.4% of our diet. It's a fantastically wasteful, profligate use of land to produce us with this boutique product, the lamb chop. And when you think of what could be there, when you think of what was there before the sheep, this fully automated system for environmental destruction, is let loose to just nibble out all the palatable plants, the tree seedlings, all the rest of it, reducing the place to a wasteland, well, it breaks my heart. And then when you look at what's going on worldwide, you see something very similar. We have television chefs all over the place saying, stop eating meat from these indoor intensive farms where the pigs and the chickens and stuff are kept because it's so cruel, as indeed it is. Eat free range instead. And all you're doing by that means is swapping a disaster for animal welfare with a disaster for the natural world. Free range chickens lay down this scorching carpet of reactive phosphate, chicken shit, which whenever there's a heavy rainfall, straight into the nearest river. Pigs do so much damage to the structure of the soil that a friend of mine calls it open-cast pig mining. As for sheep and cattle ranching, well, they are now the foremost cause of wildlife loss and habitat loss around the world. Staggering amounts of destruction caused by our appetite for meat. And, it's not like the indoor animals don't do any harm either. The amount of soya and maize, these two great planet-ripping crops, which are fed to them, ensures that they too have a massive impact. In fact, if you want to eat less soya, eat soya. Because the really inefficient way of consuming soya is doing so through the meat of an animal which has been eating soya. And you consume far, far less of it if you eat it directly. By consuming plant protein as opposed to animal protein, you reduce your contribution to the clearance of natural habitats by 96%. So much for meat, but for me now it goes beyond meat. And the reason for this was something that happened when, and this makes me a very odd, almost vegan indeed, I was fishing at the end of the last trout season in Devon on the River Culm. Well, I wasn't fishing, I went down there to fish, but I could smell the river from 50 metres away. It had turned into a farm sewer. It was just a stinking mass of cow shit. And the only life form in it was sewage fungus, filamentous, wavery, feathery sewage fungus, which now coated the entire bed of the river. So instead of fishing, I traced this thing upstream, got to this massive, intensive dairy unit up there, and found the broken pipe coming out of a slurry pit at the bottom, which was just pouring straight into the river, wiping it out. Went to the Environment Agency, their pollution hotline. Ring our pollution hotline if ever you see any incidents of pollution, and we'll be onto it straight away. And the pollution hotline, oh, very interesting, sir. Yeah, I'll send you the photos, right? Okay, thank you, sir, very interesting. What do you think of them? Oh, very serious, obviously a serious case, right? So I write it up in The Guardian, photos, all the rest of it. The Environment Agency are on the case. 2 weeks later, I ring them up and say, so what have you done about this? Oh, we decided it's not a serious incident, sir. What do you mean it's not a serious incident? Well, we found no evidence of a fish kill. Of course you found no evidence of a fucking fish kill. There are no fish left in the river. You would expect a fish kill when you have an acute but sudden pollution incident. This is a chronic one. There have been no fish there for months. There's nothing growing there except sewage fungus. Well, thank you for your opinion, sir. We've decided not to enforce. And then I wrote that up, and I had 2 separate whistleblowers from the Environment Agency got in touch. Said this is the instruction right across the board now. We do not enforce against basic farm pollution that's taking place in our rivers. I thought, right, sod it. If that's the case, I'm out of this. If you're not going to regulate the industry, I'm not going to buy the products. And again, you look at the global picture and these vast plumes of cow shit just pouring down the rivers, of chicken shit from the egg farms. It's just devastating to all the things that I love. I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want anything to do with the climate change it's causing. I don't want anything to do with this erosion of everything that makes this world wonderful, and this reduction, this wearing away of the nap of the earth until we're just left with the same grey, homogeneous nothingness everywhere. That's what the livestock industry is doing, and fine, you do that, but I'm not going to be part of it anymore. And it seems to me that, yeah, sure, this is a choice. This is your choice. I can't make you eat meat or not eat meat. I don't want to make you eat meat or not eat meat. But it seems to me that if there is a measure of human progress, it is not having to be what our ancestors were. It's not having to be governed by the choices that they made. Otherwise, I'll be talking to you in a bearskin leotard. I agree with a lot of what Adrian says about the role of meat in human evolution. It was critically important for all the reasons that you say. You're quite right about that. But we don't have to do that anymore. We've found other ways of feeding ourselves. We've found other ways of sharing our lives together, of engaging communally, of doing lovely things together, of creating beautiful stuff like this without actually having to eat a mammoth before we do it. And that, surely, is what makes us human. It's what makes us what we are, is the choice not to be what we were. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Adrian, whatever you say about food libertarianism, surely we have a collective responsibility to prevent the kind of destruction that George is talking about. I mean, if we see animals not as food, but as weapons of environmental mass destruction, don't we need to accept some responsibility in the way that we contribute towards that?
No, it's a sweet story, and you do tell it awfully well. Bless you. But it's entirely fallacious.
Oh, almost made it.
And the thing that's wrong about it is that how many of you believe that nature has a balance?
Oh my
That nature
God.
is this finely wrought, even, beautiful, tapestry of interrelated things that all lean one against the other and make it all perfect and wonderful. Because if you do, and it's what George believes, you're entirely wrong. Nature works on cataclysm and accident. We are all competitive. We were born competitive, we grew up competitive, we were evolved from competition.
God.
There is no right way for the world to be. There was no moment where George's world was just, keep it there, don't move. That's it, no, right there.
No!
There was no marvellous time when the uplands were just that nice little bit of woodiness and not too many thistles. And it didn't exist. We all get on because something else fails. The natural role of existence is to lead to extermination. That's what happens to most things.
I don't like this game.
We've been immensely successful as a
I don't like
species.
this fucking game, bro.
That's not our fault. That's our brilliance. What I mind about George's view of the world is that there is nature and then there's us. There's everything else. There's all the glory. And then there's me. Twat. Greedy, fat, farting, slovenly, slothful, uncaring
my
twat
God.
eating things with eyes. I am not part of nature as every other species here in this world. All of us are. And what I mind about this view of the way the world works is it stops me being part of my birthright, which is part of natural selection. It makes me a fucking zookeeper.
Oh my God, fuck this guy.
And I don't want to be a park ranger in your park.
Oh.
You're not invited. Well, look, it's very sweet of you to tell me what my beliefs are. But, and, obviously I see, the world is full of cataclysm. Always has been. There's always been cycles of destruction and extinction and then rebirth and stuff. But, what we're doing at the moment is holding it down. We don't let go. We don't sort of suddenly hit it and then say, all right, well, we've done the damage for a couple of million years. We'll sort of leave it alone for a bit. We just keep on the case all the time, just knocking and knocking and knocking it back. And within my own lifetime, I've seen massive changes. And actually, my concern is not for some abstract thing we call nature, because as Raymond Williams says, nature is the most complex word in the English language. What does it even mean? We're part of nature, we're not part of nature. I don't know what that means. My concern is for my own feelings and people who also have those feelings about seeing this mass destruction.
That was the bit I was going to get to, the vanity.
Yeah, it is vanity. Of course it's vanity. But then we are all vanity. Everything is vanity. We love this building because it reflects something that's inside us or we would like to be inside us. Anything we love, it's the same. We love our children out of a kind of vanity in the same way. But is that a bad thing? Is that vanity some form of evil? I think not. I think it's what allows us to be the outward-looking, generous-spirited, engaged, amazing creatures that we are, and to deprive us of the delight, the wonder, the joy in what excites us, particularly in the natural world. That is a crime against ourselves, apart from anything else.
I think this is just sort of Wordsworthian.
But surely if we see destruction in the natural world and we can do something to prevent it, it would make sense.
You must understand that what you're doing is gardening. I quite like gardening. I mean, that's fine, but that's what you're doing. You are saying, I have an out of nature, a human and aesthetic judgment, a view about what this landscape should look like, what should grow here, what it should sound like, what it should smell like, what it should be, what it should evoke in me. This is nothing to do with nature. This is all to do with me, and it's gardening. And that's fine, but just call it gardening.
Well, I've said, I kind of agree with you that is where far too much conservation is. You read these management plans, and the grass in this part of the reserve should be 10 centimetres high, and the following species should be in it, and the following should not. And manage it, just like a garden, just like you say. What I like is the idea of rewilding, of just letting things go and seeing what happens. And then you get far more exciting, wild, dramatic, extraordinary landscapes and ecosystems developing. And part of the joy of it, the serendipity of it, is the surprise that you get from not knowing what the hell is going to happen. And that's what nature's about. Nature is not just, or the natural world, or whatever we want to call it, it's not just a collection of species in a museum. It's all the dynamic interactions between them, which you can't predict. And to me, and it's my vanity, a lot of the beauty and the joy of nature is in that dynamic interaction. But it's those processes, as well as the species, which we're wiping out at the most horrendous rate, and principally because of the stuff we eat.
George, let me ask you this. When I was vegan, one of the things that bothered me was the question of whether not eating meat is enough. I mean, if the destruction you're talking about is as serious as it is, then why is eating meat the solution? You could say anyone who shops at supermarkets or wears mass-produced clothes or buys anything that's produced through an industrial process is contributing to the same thing. So why the focus on meat as the problem?
Well, you're right, it's never enough. Nothing is ever going to be enough. And so it's a question of compromise, it's a question of balance. Yeah, I've got leather shoes on. Yeah, I'll eat the fish that I catch. Every couple of weeks I'll eat an egg. I'll still eat roadkill and stuff because no one killed it for me. But I know that just my very existence means I'm exerting an impact on the living world. Of course it does. Even a vegan diet, you are exerting an impact on the living world. It's a question of degree. But the impact of meat is so wildly, disproportionately ridiculous that anyone, even if you don't love the natural world, how about just hating waste? And just the idea of hating waste should be enough to think, that's a really dumb thing to be doing. Just eating, getting a modicum of pleasure from it, But, you haven't tried my Thai green curry, where you get a modicum of pleasure, the same pleasure from that.
What do you make it with?
Tofu, chickpeas, whatever. You just throw in.
You love a bit of whatsoever, don't you?
but you get a little bit of pleasure, but the disproportion between that little bit of extra pleasure you might get from eating meat and the phenomenal amount of destruction required to produce it should surely commend it to anyone as a stupid thing to do.
Just keeping on the theme of destruction, we haven't talked at all about animal welfare, really. Adrian.
This is going to be fun.
Have you ever killed anything?
No.
And what do you feel about mass intensive farming that is well known to cause
I've killed lots and lots and lots of things. Famously, I shot a baboon. And I shoot for fun. I shoot birds. I've shot buffalo. I've shot deer. That's about it. I don't like fishing. Wet knitting.
Wet knitting.
You clearly feel at ease with the idea of killing animals and not necessarily for consumption.
But I eat everything, or someone's eaten everything. I mean, I wouldn't ever kill anything because he's got a spotty coat. I mean, it's only about food. And I started off as a vegetarian. I went to a vegetarian boarding school, the only one in the country, sent by my hippie parents.
I suspect that has a lot to answer for.
Yeah. do you know?
I think we just got to the nub of it, haven't we? We just stopped the rest of the debate now. We know what this is all about.
The only other inmate you'll have ever heard of was Michael Winner.
Jeez, that place must be closed down.
And then when I stopped being vegetarian, I decided that I would, if I was going to eat meat, I had to be prepared to do the whole business myself. You can't just jump in when it looks like a brick. So I started gutting animals and then killing them and eating them and cooking them and skinning them, and I still do that. And I derive an enormous amount of pleasure from going out and finding and catching and getting my own food. Do I care about the pain that animals that have inflicted on them? Up to a point. I think that the obsession with the last 3.5 seconds of animals' lives, which is what the argument always comes down to, is again a desperate vanity. It's about us. It's about how do I feel about killing this animal. It's about, is an animal, a halal animal, slightly worse off than a kosher animal? Who gives a fuck? Really. Those things I don't care about. I think it's unpleasant if you see animals that are badly husbanded anywhere. Animals that are kept in, crates that are too small.
And as a food critic, how do you feel about
the worst
meat
thing, by the way?
produced
How
that
many
way?
of you eat soft-shell crabs? Don't. If you ever saw the agony of a soft-shell crab home, you never eat another one.
I didn't think we'd get some compassion from Adrian. George, your argument is more about the environmental damage than animal welfare. Even bursting those pigs didn't inure you to...
It's not that I don't have concerns about that as well. I suppose... I was going to say like Adrian, but actually there's nothing like Adrian. I don't have nearly as much of a problem with shooting a wild animal that's had a reasonable life than keeping an animal in really crap conditions for the whole of that life. And as I saw on the pig farm I worked on, as I've seen in endless broiler and battery chicken units and the rest of it, animals are treated really amazingly badly. We think of ourselves as a nation of animal lovers, and we lavish great affection on our dogs and cats, which means that largely feeding them on pigs and chickens and other animals which have been treated terribly in order for us to lavish that affection on them. And yet you take a pig, just as intelligent as a dog, just as capable of suffering as a dog, and they are kept in really, really horrible conditions, and it's getting bigger, the scale of it's getting much bigger.
Sorry, can I jump? I don't want to interrupt you. Can I jump in there? Because I think this is another thing that I have a bugbear with, which is the hierarchy of suffering. which is that the closer animals are to us, the more we can identify with them. Again, the vanity. The more responsibility we have for them and to them. Therefore, chimpanzees, obviously, they should be honorary people. But you know, abalone, fuck them.
But isn't it about the capacity for suffering? I mean,
No,
the abalone's
I don't think
got
it,
a much more basic
I don't think
nervous
in the
system.
natural world, the threshold for the right to life should be having a nervous system that's nearly like mine.
Well, I'm not really arguing about the threshold for the right to
But
life.
it is
I'm
hard to
arguing
draw the
about
line.
So argue about the threshold for the right to life.
It is hard to draw the line, isn't it? If you make a kind of sentient capacity to feel pain argument for not killing animals.
But this isn't about
plants. There's some evidence can feel pain. That's why some people believe in only eating things that fall naturally from the tree. Where do you draw the line?
It's not about drawing hard lines. It's about saying, look, if the capacity for suffering is very high, then we should be more concerned about that suffering. And it's as simple as that. It's not a complicated argument. And yeah, we have a particularly high capacity for suffering because we are so bright and we've got such a highly developed central nervous system. But there are many other mammals in particular which are also pretty bright and have got just as developed central nervous systems as we have. Their capacity for suffering is very great.
I don't think that should be the criteria. I think that everything is part of nature. Everything has the right to be part of it. But everything dies in it, and everything gets eaten. Everything gets eaten. Everything dies.
But you see, that's not my objection in this respect. It's what happens when they're alive, which is the main animal welfare issue.
Okay.
Quickly, before we bring everyone else in, what about health? Adrian, there's evidence that meat causes disease, that a plant-based lifestyle is healthier. Do you think there's any merit in advocating plant-based diets from a health perspective?
No.
Do you accept that there is evidence that it's healthier to eat a plant-based diet?
Do you know what my job is?
I am familiar with your work.
No, there isn't. It's incredibly difficult to replace meat protein. It's a real problem for people who don't eat meat protein. And you either have to have hideous, textured, grown, manufactured protein, which has all sorts of problems with it.
As a child in vegetarian boarding school, were you able to eat a balanced diet?
No, I think I basically ate eggs and cornflakes. No, I mean, it just is. That said, there are loads of people who are vegetarians and live perfectly healthy lives, most of India. But it is it would also be incredibly difficult to replace all of the meat production with an equal and valuable amount of plant production. I once went on a very interesting trip to Madagascar. If you haven't been, go while stocks last. There's not a lot of it left. It's terrific, Madagascar. An amazing, amazing, amazing place. And I went with Kew Gardens, who were going to collect. They're doing the Millennium Seed. One of the most pointless things ever conceived is that we're going to go and collect 10% of all the seeds in the world and hide them. But I love them for doing it. So I went off with them and did that. And the thing that is eating, quite rightly, as George will point out, the thing that's eating Madagascar are cattle. Zebu cattle, which were brought over by the Africans, who were the second lot of people who got to Madagascar. And I was there with a marvellously erudite, clever, sensitive local Madagascan biologist. And every night we would watch the fires burn across the central ridge while they burn for grazing for their zebu cattle. Huge amounts of stuff was gone. None of the baobabs are now producing young baobabs. There were no young baobabs left in all of the 6 or 7 varieties of baobab in the world. They're all in Madagascar, 1 in Australia, 2 in Africa. There are no young. They've all been eaten by cattle. And I talked to this man about the cattle. I said, the cattle are obviously a problem. And he went, I know you can't get enough of them. And I went, no, really? He said, well, but the cattle were always here. And I went, no, the cattle weren't always here. Cattle were brought over here in the 16th century. He went, no, cattle have always been here. There have always been zebu here. As long as there have been people here, there have been zebu here. My people came with the cattle. And I don't think that's probably quite right. He was a biologist. He was a scientist. He'd been trained. He was incredibly clever, very nice. I couldn't argue with him. That was his culture. That was who he was. They are so tied up with the idea of being cattle-rearing people that that's what they do. That is who they are. I wasn't going to say, look, I'm terribly sorry, but George is going to really have a go at you when he gets back. You have to understand that the way people eat, what they do, how they live, is as important as all the other stuff. It's as important as you getting fucking trees on Scharfell or whatever it is you want. Those things, the way our culture works and the culture of our food and how it matters to us and what we grow up with, what we grow with, is really important. And you can't just dismiss it because it ruins your view.
Can't we have new cultures?
Go and invent one. Go on.
I mean, it's culturally specific, isn't it? I can say as someone who's tried to be vegan and raw vegan in West Africa, it's not a culture that's universal. Isn't there something problematic about us trying to impose our Western-centric ideas about wellness and veganism on other cultures that, as Adrian's saying, are fundamentally attached to meat eating?
I'm not trying to impose it. I'm just making an argument that, if we want to minimise our impacts, this is the way to do it. As for the idea that, you can't have a diet, you can't replace the protein, it's simply not true. It's easy. Nowadays it is. It didn't used to be because, well, actually maybe it was. We used to eat dal basically in this country, peas pudding, peas pottage, pea soup. It was dal. And it's still there. We've still got all the pulses, you've got all the nuts and seeds and all the rest of it. It's actually easy, and I think it's pretty healthy. I've lost a stone. And I've stopped, if I carried on losing, it would have been a problem. But, it's fine. And as for the health side, well, if you're a total 100% vegan, there's a couple of supplements you might want to take. But that's it. It's really not difficult, and it's not like it's some huge sacrifice we have to make. It's not like we have to abandon our children to the wolves or something. That might also be arguable, but that's a different matter. This is simply exchanging one lot of nice things we eat for another lot of nice things we eat. And it's not my culture to eat meat. Sure, I was brought up eating meat, but I was brought up in this deracinated country where actually people like us don't really have a lot of cultures anymore, or certainly I didn't where I was brought up. And it's just as easy to have a slightly different culture today, and I feel more comfortable and more embedded in that culture. Again, we don't have to be what we were.
I want to bring in the audience now. So if you could raise your hand if you have a question. We'll take them in batches, I think, of 3. And if you could wait till you get a microphone before you speak, because we are recording this. So this gentleman here I saw first, the lady there in the turtleneck, and the lady there. I'll come to you in the next round.
Is that on? Oh, yeah, hello. So this is for Adrian. You're basically saying farming's right and natural and so on. The thing is, I'm very happy with humans being able to kill animals and eat them. That's fine as long as they're wild animals. When you get to farming, and our farming might be okay, but the thing is, there's got to be certain things that we could do wrong. So, like it's possible to breed animals so that they are bred to suffer. Like for example, dachshunds now have legs that are so short that they can't really walk properly.
I've never eaten a dachshund.
No, okay. Okay, well, I mean, basically, I think what I'm trying to say is like...
Sausages, yeah, sausage dogs.
I think...
It's not actually where sausages come from.
Fuck.
I think what I'm trying to say is, although, okay, you might be comfortable with the level of farming at the moment or whatever, although I think as Michael says, I think probably we eat too much meat, and I want to ask if you consider whether maybe we should just eat less. But
I don't want to interrupt, but could you...
Sorry, yes. What I really want to ask is can you imagine any situation where we could be doing something wrong, farming things too much. Because humans have incredible power.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
Hi. I've got a comment and a question. My comment was on your point about cultures. We should just accept culture's choice to eat meat. You could equally argue that about slavery back in the day. We should just accept people's choice to traffic humans, and if they want to do that, and that's that. Blah.
I'm sorry, that's a really, really interesting and silly point. Do you really think that all of gastronomy and slavery are equitable?
Yeah, I think.
Good. Okay. Well, that's fine. Then we really disagree.
I don't think they're the same. It's not the same, but there are parallels. There are really strong parallels.
Okay. Fine. You're wrong.
You can undermine that by calling it silly. But,
Did you say you had a question?
But I have a question, and that's more on resilience and biodiversity, because the way we farm. So we are. Our ancestors are something like 12,000 different human beings. That's our genetic biodiversity isn't very strong. And the way we farm means we have very specific types of animals, and we've really reduced the amount of biodiversity that we're ingesting as well. And so we're not resilient at all to superbugs and things like that. So there's a massive issue there as well.
Thank you.
I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Thank you very much. Yes.
George is more better on that.
There's one more question.
This is actually a question for you.
For me?
Yeah.
Okay.